We now turn to our last panel. Since yesterday, we have discussed a number of issues related to artificial intelligence and its impact on different fields of our societies. In particular, we heard how the National Science Foundation, for instance, in the United States, was adopting a global approach around artificial intelligence. Jason Mathieu, for his part, presented also the specific approach of Georgetown University. From now on, we will present specific researches of university networks. These universities are members of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. In a few minutes, I will introduce some participants who are the leaders of this research. For now, I would like you to pay a special attention to the first speech. Indeed, here it will not be a question of presenting research on artificial intelligence, but research carried out within the IFCU International Research Center and which uses artificial intelligence. So in IFCU, we use artificial intelligence as a tool. And for that, it's my pleasure to introduce Thierry Lorho. Thierry is a computer engineer and information scientist, expert in artificial intelligence and the quantum approach of information theory and the decision theory. He's a graduate of the Institute Mines Telecom and also MBA of Paris-Dauphine University. Besides his works on the advanced artificial intelligence system Mileva, he has 25 years of experience in the banking information services with a leading European IT consultancy, where he currently holds the position of Chief Information Security Officer. So thank you, Thierry, for being with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Sorry, François. Yeah. I will share my screen. Okay. You listen me? It's
yes,
okay?
It's
okay.
We can hear you and we see the screen.
Okay, good. So, I'm going to present you three applications that use Mileva artificial intelligence. On the left, this is Mileva marriage, Albert Einstein's first wife, in fact. Okay, we will address 4 points. The first sets the scope for AI. Okay. In fact, just to be clear, AI is a physics concept so vague that there is no single definitions, but easily a dozen. There is no single AI, but for example, the AI driving a car doesn't handle the same knowledge as an AI who has to recognize pictures. In other words, its mathematical framework is absolutely not the same as that of the AI calibrated to identify pictures. In fact, AIs operate in silos. There is no universal AI. There are many issues to be resolved. And we will see that the projects carried out partly or totally address them. So, sorry. Oops. So, what are Mileva AI principles? Mileva uses the principles of actor network theory based on the works of philosophers and historian Michel Serres to combine actors and make them interact. By actor, here we we mean any type of actor, a person, a company, a state, a concept, a university, a law, for example. Finally, the challenge is to successfully model complex environments. Basically, all interactions between actors are represented in the form of a network. The strengths of the links between the actors will evolve through interactions and information. Three indicators use the principles of Lorho information theory. With these indicators, uncertainty, informativity, and predictability, Mileva evolves in a complex universe in constant interaction. Just a point of attention. Mileva doesn't replace human expertise. It's a partner capable of working and sharing with human experts. It's an assistant, among others, which helps humans in their decision-making. Oh, okay. This slide is a little more technical. But it's important to understand the mathematical rigor developed within the framework of this area. Using this complex mathematical framework, it's possible to model the evolution of systemic risks in an uncertain environment with advanced decision-making models. Just very quickly, I will present three results to give you a small idea of what Mileva can do. One of the first time I worked with François Mabille, François wondered whether our AI could understand the complexity of an election process. And just before the election of the new Pope, we challenged Mileva, and Mileva answered us as at the center of all interactions in this election. There is a Cardinal Bergoglio, and hello, François. Do you know this Cardinal? Because we didn't know it.
Oui, je suis en conférence, donc je t'entends. Oui.
Okay. On this next example, another terribly complex process and a question: what are the possible futures of Bashar al-Assad? Mileva answers he will remain in power at least by 2016, 2017, and Russia is in the center of the game. Our last example, we have been asked to monitor the French presidential election, and among many weak signals, Mileva identifies a much stronger and more significant one, high risk of social instability linked to the energy transition, and more particularly diesel taxation in the case of Emmanuel Macron election. Also, we know what happened next in the form of yellow vest. So let's talk about concrete applications. First, it's the International Relations newsletter. The International Relations newsletters is the first application of AI for IFCU. It has no language barriers. It also adapts to the user's preferences. It will therefore evolve over time. Mileva will detect weak signals and offer you what is today's most effective and relevant newsletter. Relevant graphs also make it possible to monitor the evolution of weak signals. In fact, in a very simple way, it's possible to understand what is happening in the world. Here, you can see few screenshots of the newsletter dashboard. And so I think this newsletter is a fantastic tool for monitoring the world and understanding it better. Okay, next with the previous newsletter, Mileva identified weak signals. Here, with the Newman benchmark, the ethical dimension of usual writing is taken into account. By contextualizing all the information of a university, it becomes possible to compare what would otherwise be impossible. Facing Moody's, which was unable to satisfy IFCU requirements, Mileva was able to provide a concrete response. We take into account the moral, ethical, and spiritual dimension proper to the universities in your network. The rating co-constructed with IFCU allow us to provide all the necessary information. The dashboard helps universities to make the best possible decision in a world in a perpetual change. And last, early warning Catholic care is the latest project carried out with the FCU. The challenge is to identify the weak signals of emerging, re-emerging epidemic disease, and to anticipate the evolution of this disease. We will use all Mileva's computing power to model the evolution of weak signals in a complex environment. The challenges are immense, the technical challenge too. By exploiting all of Mileva's cognitive capacity, like the quantum decision capacities, the dashboard will allow us to understand the evolution, but also the possible impacts of such signals. A fantastic team has been put together to deal with the challenge. A Mileva prototype should be available at the end of the year, and the completed version will be ready by the middle of the next year. Thanks.
So thank you, Thierry. I think that we've had some problems of connection, but I hope that each one could hear you. I think that we will have to discuss about your presentation, and perhaps that some of us will add some specific comments and more particularly about the work we've done with you for the social responsibility framework, and also for the one that you have just mentioned about early warning system for preventing pandemics. It is a very, very interesting work, which is related also to what was said yesterday during the first panel about the use and the impact of artificial intelligence on health issues. So thank you, Thierry. Now we are going to hear Mathieu Guillermin. Mathieu Guillermin is a lecturer at the Catholique University of Lyon. The heart of his research and teaching work focuses on the philosophical and ethical questions raised by new digital technologies. I mean big data, artificial intelligence, robots. Since 2016, he joins the group of Epistemology and Ethics of Sciences and Technologies of the General Biology Laboratory of the Catholic University of Lyon. There was Thierry. Within this team, he notably explores the links between ethical approach, scientific research, and technological development. And Mathieu is the head of a project. This project is entitled Humanism at the Time of Neurosciences and Artificial Intelligence. It is a research action project hosted by the International Federation of Catholic Universities and aiming at ethically empowering persons that are actors of and impacted by scientific and technological developments in this field. So thank you very much, Mathieu, for being with us, and I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, François. I'm trying to share my screen. You tell me if it's working. Normally, you should see the slides.
It's okay, Mathieu.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for the invitation to contribute to this great forum and to it's stimulating, very, very stimulating discussions. I'm glad and grateful to have the opportunity to share with you a presentation of the project you just introduced. For short, the project is called NHNAI, for New Humanism at the Time of Neurosciences and Artificial Intelligence, with the H coming from the Cyrillic pronunciation to do the E, so NHNAI. And I will use the acronym in the next part of my presentation. And this presentation is also an invitation to join the project in case it fits your interests and concern. So as François said, the project is hosted by the FIUC-IFCU and is coordinated here in Lyon Catholique University. And the goal is to build a network for exploring the question of humanism at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence. The basic orientations of this NHNAI initiative have been settled at the occasion of a kickoff seminar in June 2019 with 3 other funding partners, LUMSA from Rome, Université de Namur, and Catholique University of Lille. And the intent is to confront with the ethical issues raised by neurosciences and artificial intelligence, such as those put forward in our wonderful exchanges during these 2 days. For instance, how to balance privacy or freedom with performance or efficiency when developing and using AI or neurosciences technologies, how to fight against inequalities such technologies might propagate or reinforce. Can even these technologies help us reducing those inequalities? Should we collect and exploit data about students' behavior? Should we use brain scans or EEG to characterize how they learn? And when automatizing decision-making, how to keep or put human in the loop? What does this even mean? So all of these questions, a few among numerous very important ethical issues, and they highlight the urgent need for a collective ethical compass. NHNAI project is aimed at contributing to the emergence of such a compass to better navigate at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence through an exploration of the notion of humanism. And at first sight, humanism seems tightly connected with ethical endeavor. There is a kind of common sense appeal to humanism through notions like humanist values or human dignity, human rights. And this appeal resonates with 4 centuries of cultural and political history, humanism somehow presents itself as a legacy of modernity with its scientific and political revolutions. In sum, humanism acts as a powerful regulative ideal meant to capture the most valuable traits of our contemporary civilizations. However, as I'll try to illustrate a bit, it is also at the same time a very, very, very ambiguous notion. Notably, once we dig a bit below the surface, it becomes clear that the idea of humanism embeds many tensions. One can, for instance, mention the contrast between a rather French-style focus upon freedom and a rather German-style focus upon understanding. A tension that can also be reflected at the level of political organization with diverging pledges either in favor of the authority of enlightened leaders or in direction of individual anticipation and freedom. The positioning with respect to religion can also largely differ among 18th and 19th proponents of humanism. Even the belief in a universal human nature is not shared necessarily among all of them. In the same vein, humanism is tightly associated with core elements of modernity that bear at the same time strong potential for cultural progress, as well as risk of excesses. And we can mention 2 important instances, with first the notion of individual. And behind that, there is the promotion of the ability to think of oneself as an individual, that is to say, as a freestanding, self-determining person, rather than primarily as the member of a given group, let's say being an inhabitant of a city or a member of a nation or a family lineage, and so on and so forth. There is behind that the insistence on the intellectual and moral freedom that makes humans what they are. It is very interesting to insist on that notion of individual because it will also promote emancipation, but there is also behind that the risk of going too far into a kind of alienating radical individualism. The second illustration or instance I would like to share is the very well-known belief in the supremacy of human reason with a rejection of all the previous external authorities, be they religious or even aristocratic. The idea behind that is that the human shall think by himself, shall rely on its own resources. This is very interesting because it pushes us to cultivate our reason, our rational procedures, our cognitive abilities. But behind there is also the risk of confounding rational procedures with truth itself as an externality. And this can open the door to radical forms of relativism. And also it's connected with that, there is a ground for a risk of imperialism from science and technologies. So if I develop a bit that with scientific revolution and maybe blinded by the successes of scientific method, in particular the instrumental and technological successes, we developed a philosophical and cultural tendency to see this scientific method as the only genuinely valuable form of human reason. But this also means focusing only on descriptive tasks, on what is reality, and on the means and powers this knowledge provide us with. While at the same time, it means also rejecting as poorly rational or as not rational at all, the discussion about ends and purposes. This tendency to mutilate human reason, to reduce it to instrumental rationality, pushed us and still pushes us into a kind of unbridled and rather uncritical quest for technological powers that may at the same time be a source of enslavement and decadence. In sum, it seems that humanism is a quite tricky idea. It seems far from a ready-to-use regulative ideal that could help us navigate at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence in particular. And the situation may be even worse, for it seems that humanism is strongly impacted by the recent developments of neurosciences and artificial intelligence. And to illustrate that, let me just give 2 short examples. The first one is with the progresses of neurosciences and AI, we tend to explain our cognitive processes, and this may rise the possibility or the temptation to think that human nature, intentionality, interiority could be reduced to scientific phenomena. This would or could in turn undermine the claim of the specificity of the humans with respect notably to animals, but also to artificial systems. And we could go up to the question, probably not today, but maybe in the next decades, about giving rights or personhood to artificial intelligence or artificial systems and robots, for instance, and why not animals? Another example with brain technologies that makes possible deep neural stimulation, which are susceptible to cure some neurological disorders or diseases. There is also the possibility for a modulation of individuals' emotion, mood, and personality. And then we can wonder about what become freedom or free will or autonomy and identity, notions that are very core to the very idea of humanism. So to summarize, humanism may be supposed to help us find our path across ethical issues at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence, but it is clearly a problematic notion. And I did not even yet mention contemporary cultural differences that, of course, should be taken into account. It is a notion full of tensions and ambiguities that may guide us, but that also triggers worries, and some of them are reflected in the multiple forms of anti-humanism, post or transhumanisms. But despite these issues with humanism, it seems to us that the notion remains crucial. Returning to the fundamentals, behind the idea of humanism, there is first and foremost maybe the question or a quest for answering two main questions. The first one is ontological and anthropological. Who are we as human? And the second one, relying on the first one, is then accordingly, what should we do? And it's an axiological question. Understood along those lines, exploring humanism seems even more necessary than ever. How to think ethical endeavor without exploring these questions? Even anti or post or transhumanisms can be seen as attempts at answering these questions. That's why we intend with NHNAI project to explore the notion of humanism, an exploration that will be guided by some basic hypotheses. And the first one is that humanism does not belong to a given academic disciplines. There is the need to bridge disciplinary insights. And a second hypothesis that pushed the idea a bit further is that humanism does not even belong to academic experts per se. There is a need to bridge across the academia-society interface. The quest of humanism is not only about definitions and academic publications. It is also, and maybe primarily, about collectively exploring and experiencing, questioning about what it means to be human. So we believe that there is an urgent need for a collective social effort of questioning about who we are and what should we do as humans, notably at the time of artificial intelligence and neurosciences. And it's a societal effort that, without reducing to them, must integrate expert insights. And here is the idea of NHNAI project, which intends to gather academic experts from Catholic universities and members of civil society in 10 different countries all around the world in a project aimed at building capacities for collectively exploring the question what it means to be human at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence. And we will have a focus upon three fields of application: education, health, and democracy or citizen life. The goal or the plan is to create a network of academic experts from various Catholic universities and to thereby gather available expertise about humanism, neurosciences, and artificial intelligence ethical issues. Then appointed thematic coordinators and mediator analysts will organize and translate these academic insights to put them at the service of the questioning of social communities in 10 different countries, to empower these communities in the exploration of what it means to be human at the time of AI and neurosciences. Interactions between NHNAI network and civil society communities will be operated by mediator analysts whose role will be crucial. They will be key to organize and translate academic knowledge in order to maximize its usefulness for communities, as well as to collect ideas emitted by these communities. To be a bit more concrete, the project will last 40 months, and the first step will be to gather the academic knowledge available and to align it upon effective societal questions that will be collected within societal communities. And it will not simply be about determining communities' interests and worries, but also to frame, based on academic insights, questions that need exploration and cannot be addressed by experts alone. Then 2 waves of societal questioning will be settled, and we will mobilize digital tools allowing for collection and analysis of the contributions made to the debates. In between these 2 waves, enrichment of the debates will be achieved by sharing the first outcomes of the debates across the different countries, and also enrich through new insight academic experts might want to share in reaction to this first round of debates. Finally, analysis and synthesis of the material produced by digital debates will be conducted to emit recommendations for bottom-up policymaking, as well as for ethical guidelines and other sort of soft law regulation tools. These recommendations will then be disseminated, notably toward national and international public institutions. In parallel, we will conduct a more fundamental and reflexive research to better understand how to train actors of such initiatives of collective questioning at the interface of academia and civil society. In terms of outcomes, beyond the seeds for bottom-up regulation and policy making the project will produce, we also hope interactions with social communities will trigger new perspectives for academic research. And maybe more importantly, we also expect to generate social learning susceptible to increase awareness and expectancies about who we are and who we ought to be as humans at the time of neurosciences and artificial intelligence. And this in turn could lead to reinforced social supports to policy regulation, and it could also maybe contribute to opening viable economic space for ethical entrepreneurship. And I conclude by thanking you for your attention, and I'll be glad to discuss further with you the details of the project as well as the various possibilities for participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mathieu, for this presentation, which was really complete and very interesting. I think that we will have many questions to ask you. So we now turn to our last panelist, William Asselberg, who is a professor in the Institute for Political Studies of Catholic University, Portugal, as well as a research fellow of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture at the University of Virginia. He works on philosophical issues concerning moral character and the virtues, practical reasoning, human happiness and well-being, meaningful work and leisure, and the ethical and political implication of emerging technologies, particularly artificial intelligence and automation. And so I think that you are going to present us a specific project, Artificial Intelligence and the Common Good, an interdisciplinary research proposal, which is about the articulation of a human-centered relationship between human beings and artificial intelligence. Thank you very much for being with us, and I give you the floor.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this conference so far. It's been very stimulating. I'm going to share my screen, if I may. I have a little PowerPoint. We may be getting tired of our PowerPoints, but I will share one last one. So I must say I was very happy to hear the last presentation. I think there's some real synergies potential synergies between this project that I'm about to, or proposal for a project that I will present, and the last project. So I will follow up with the last speaker and discuss further. But so artificial intelligence and the common good is a proposal for an interdisciplinary research project involving several different Catholic universities, to be run by Catholic University Portugal, by myself and Pedro, who is here with us as well, in core partnership with Boston College and Catholic University America and a few other schools in the SACRU and FIUC network. So I don't need to say too much about this situation we're living in, because we've had very eloquent speakers throughout the last 2 days describing this. I mean, the context in which we live is one in which artificial intelligence has become a pervasive, increasingly pervasive aspect of everyday human life. And it is in our work, in our leisure, in our politics, in our media and news consumption. And it's pervasive in a way that's becoming increasingly hard to see and evaluate and understand from an ethical standpoint. And no doubt, artificial intelligence will expand still further, both in terms of its power and in terms of its impact upon human lives and societies. Now, what this research proposal will focus on, and this artificial intelligence and the common good, is a proposal for at least 3-year inter-university research project that will bring together a group of humanistic scientists, philosophers, and ethicists from Catholic universities around the world. And the hope is to enrich the debate around, quote unquote, humanizing AI. So this term, a human-centered relationship between human beings on the one hand and artificial intelligence on the other, this concept has gotten a lot of traction in the literature of the last few years by eminent scholars like Stuart Russell, who was already mentioned yesterday, Gary Marcus, Martin Ford, Hannah Fry, a number of others, insist that we need to have a human-centered or humane relationship with AI. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have a human-centered relationship with AI? Well, my hunch is that the Catholic intellectual tradition, in the broad sense of non-doctrinal sense of an intellectual tradition or group of scholars, has something distinctive to contribute to this question about what constitutes a human-centered relationship with AI. Namely, Catholic universities are the carriers of a philosophically and morally rich conception of the human person, including conceptions of ethical virtues, the emotions, ideals of human social practice, of social justice. And so artificial intelligence and the common good would aim thereby to be a project that draws upon the philosophical and morally rich notion of the human person that's part of the Catholic tradition, intellectual tradition, so as to give more concrete substance to this ideal of a human-AI relationship that safeguards and strengthens distinctively human skills and capacities and respects the dignity of the human person, in contrast to the other ways that things could go. For instance, the more problematic forms of man-computer relationship in which mechanical processes are substituted for human judgment, social ties, human agency, often in the financial interest of a small technological elite. So this research project will roughly have 4 areas that I will briefly describe to you. One involving the concept of the human person and how to articulate that notion in the age of cognitive science and computer science and artificial intelligence. The second, the concept of values and ethics or morality, which is often gestured at by AI ethicists, but not really explained in depth. Third, an area of research focusing on the ways in which artificial intelligence is transforming the fabric of social life and economic life in advanced economies. And then finally, an area where we analyze specific concrete moral challenges posed by AI. So let me just say a little bit about each of these. So any discussion of a human-centered relationship between human beings and artificial intelligence presupposes, it requires, an appropriate concept of the human being. And thereby we have to ask, what are the distinctively intellectual and practical abilities of the human person? And how might they be impacted for benefit or harm by AI and related technologies? What can we learn from abstract computer models of cognition and decision-making? And do we risk diminishing ourselves and our sense of human dignity by seeing ourselves as information processing machines, as biologically evolved computers, and in fact, inferior computers, computers that are more biased and less exact to the computer, to contemporary powerful computers. So does the computer model of the mind and computer theories of cognition and cognitive science have a moral dimension, a potential moral risk in the way that they transform our own self-conception as humans? How is human intelligence related to our embodiment and our capacities of sensory motor action, desire, emotion, and that extremely subtle human ability of intersubjective or social understanding? And are there valuable aspects of human intelligence that simply cannot be formalized and captured by algorithms, by functions between inputs and outputs? For instance, perhaps normative or ethical judgment, spontaneous action, intuition, creative agency. So the first part, what I was just saying, is the ways that these are just sort of gestures in the ways that I think scholars in the Catholic tradition can enrich the notion of the human that is necessary as a prerequisite for the discussion of a humane relationship between man and computer and man and AI. So that's one way I think the Catholic community can contribute to these debates. But it's not the only way. Debates about ethics and AI or morals and AI often make reference to the idea of imputing values or morals into computer systems. But how should we understand the basic ideas of value, morality, ethics, or the human good within these debates? Which moral framework should be adopted? We live in a condition of cultural pluralism as regards these distinct approaches to ethics. We are the inheritors of the tradition of British utilitarianism, as well as Kantian rights-based deontology, contract theory, ancient virtue ethics. Which framework should we use? Or should we use a plurality of frameworks? Typically, AI research gravitates towards utilitarian, quantifiable ethics, but perhaps that is the easiest for computer scientists to wrap their head around, but may not be the best approach to ethics to articulate a human-centered man-AI relationship. Human moral judgment, this is a point that is dear to my research and I think goes unnoticed in a lot of contemporary work on programming morality into AI or having moral limits to AI. I mean, morals or ethics is not merely a matter of prohibitions on certain actions, and values are not simply desired outcomes. There's a richer notion of ethics and value, which involves ideals, conceptions of the human good, which are only partially grasped at any one point in time in a person's lifespan. And human judgment moral judgment often involves what philosophers call semantically deep or thick normative concepts. That is, ideas that resist straightforward definition, operationalization, and codification in algorithms. For instance, concepts like love, justice, goodness, dignity, courage, wisdom, evil, right? AI ethics does better when you just work with semantically thin notions like good or bad, or right or wrong. But how should these deeper concepts, love, justice, and so forth, impact debates about AI ethics? I won't say much about this third area because it's come up already in the previous session, but AI is poised to radically transform social and economic life, which raises a number of questions about what roles will be left for human beings in advanced economies that are saturated with AI and automated systems. Who stands to benefit from the rapid advance of AI and the concentration of power that it brings? And who will not share in those benefits? And what can we do about this? And relatedly, but not so much as a matter of economics, but rather of cultural practice, does the spread of AI risk, and the sort of the substitution of artificial intelligence and automated systems for individual judgments, risk the loss of traditional practices and acculturated forms of skill or know-how that have long been passed on from generation to generation? In fact, there's some empirical research that seems to be showing that as people become more dependent upon automated AI-enhanced support systems, they begin to lose the skills and know-how that are core to certain human practices, from transportation to language to interpersonal relationships in a number of different areas. The final section, the fourth section of this proposal, is a more specific application of the previous three areas, the sort of understanding of the human person that we get from the Catholic tradition, broadly speaking, the understanding, the wider, richer notion of ethics and morality that's not just about rules prohibiting behavior, but about an ethos in the original sense of the term, virtues and so forth, and the social understanding that the Catholic tradition provides, to bring those ideas to bear upon specific moral challenges that arise from the advance of artificial intelligence. So we can ask questions like, should we attempt to formulate and program morality algorithms in AI-powered machinery? For instance, in self-driving cars, should our self-driving cars be programmed to, for instance, kill one person to save two people in the advent of a emergency situation? How should we think about brain-computer interfaces and proposals for cybernetic enhancement? This has also already come up. What are the potential benefits and risks of quote unquote emotionally intelligent AI and social robotics? So for instance, forms of AI that are programmed so as to read human facial cues and respond to us in a way that effectively manipulates our anthropomorphizing of computers so as to feel some kind of connection with a robot, say. I think this is particularly dangerous possibility, or I don't know if dangerous is the right word, unsettling possibility, for instance, in proposals for elder care robots for aging populations that will help take care of the elderly in homes, and which will be emotionally intelligent. That is, will read facial cues and try to interact as an emotional being, or a simulacrum of an emotional being with other human beings. In what ways could AI-powered surveillance, facial recognition, emotion recognition, lip-reading technology be used by powerful actors, corporations, governments, for good and ill? And how should we assess the rise of techniques of self-monitoring and self-quantification using AI tools? What's been called in the United States the quantified self movement. People using wearable AI-powered devices so as to continuously monitor themselves and to understand themselves and reflect on their goals, with techniques from artificial intelligence and computer science as a kind of new ethos. Okay, so the idea is to draw upon the strengths of the liberal tradition and Catholic intellectual tradition, in particular, its rich notion of the human person, its more historically informed and subtle notion of morality and ethics, as well as Catholic social thought, so as to bring those strengths to bear on the question of how to formulate a humane AI man-AI relationship, a human-centered relationship between human beings and artificial intelligence. This is still very much this is purely an outline, a blueprint, and I look forward to welcome any feedback, any suggestions, and I hope to discuss this further with some of the people present here. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this fascinating intervention, which raises so many important questions. And I think that your intervention echoed also with the one of Don and Thierry a few minutes ago. I think that we can be very satisfied to see that so many Catholic universities are committed to work and study on such an important topic. So I think that now we can debate. Of course, you can debate with each other, and if there are some questions, you can write them on the chat. Before someone can take the floor, I don't know if Montserrat is here and if she's listening to us, because I thought that it could be interesting that as a sociologist, you can perhaps react to Thierry's presentation and tell us how, as a sociologist, you are at the head of IFCU Research Center. You perceive the artificial intelligence that is Mileva.
Thank you, Francois, for giving me the floor. So, well, I prepared a very small intervention because indeed I would like to share with you some highlights about the IFCU project on university social responsibility, which has relied on artificial intelligence, in particular on Mileva, which Thierry Lorho has just presented to us. I think it's important to say that 3 years ago at IFCU, we started a collective process aiming at producing an international reference framework on university social responsibility, a framework that contains 160 indicators. And once the framework was ready, we started to build an assessment system in collaboration with Thierry Lorho and his team. And in this process, we encountered various challenges. But one of the main challenges was to come up with an international evaluation tool that was relevant to an institution and to any country in the world. This was not an easy task because it's common knowledge that the implementation of an international standard at a local level cannot take place automatically, but it rather needs substantial adjustments. And this is in fact one of the flaws, among others, of many university rankings and similar evaluation systems that you can find nowadays that are really that are being used by well, most of our institutions. The thing is that these rankings, these systems apply a common standard to any institution, no matter their identity nor their location, in a kind of automatic manner. Of course, they have been designed within a given context, and for a given context, usually adopting narrow or sectoral approaches, and still they are being applied anywhere to any institution, no matter, as I said, the region nor the identity of the same. So this is one of the challenges we were also facing. Of course, as we think about other kinds of evaluations, like on-site evaluations, well, the picture is not that different. You know, I'm thinking about evaluations where you have a team of evaluators paying a visit to the concert institution. The picture is not that different. Of course, the possibilities that this kind of evaluations offer are quite interesting, but they are relatively limited because they require a substantial budget and hard work before, during, and after the visit. And again, they are based as well on standardized models and grids. And we all know that institutional practices tend to differ. We know that Jesuit universities present different features from Dominican universities or Lasallian universities. We also know that location matters, that the Latin American context differs in a substantial manner from the Asian or the European context. Even within the same region, we find quite a lot of diversity from one country to another. So, well, what I'm saying is not new. And still, the challenge is there. The challenge is always there. The challenge is there, and it launches the whole debate about how to apprehend and connect local and global actions so that global aspects do not override local differences, the local global debate that we all know quite well. Concretely, at IFCU, we didn't want to produce, an evaluation tool on the basis of most of the evaluation tools that already exist. We wanted an evaluation tool that could be mindful of the institution's identity and context. And we realized that to do so, the indicators that we had identified that were part of the framework should be weighted, mainly because indicators' relevance is not the same for all higher education institutions. I will give you an example so that you can follow what I'm saying. We have member universities that only welcome female students. In such case, indicators regarding gender balance will not provide much useful information, you see, because the context is very particular. All the students are already women, right? Another example that I can give you is that if you take a country like France, where there are a lot of trade unions, of course, indicators related to freedom to join trade unions will appear as very relevant, but this will not be the case in countries where trade unions are hardly present. So you see, for us, it was a must to weight indicators. And in the project, artificial intelligence added value precisely resides in the fact that it offers a tailor-made solution, because it weights each of the indicators contained in the framework, and it weights them depending on the institutional context and the geographical context of the university. Of course, as you may imagine, for a human being, taking each of the 160 indicators and giving more or less weight, depending on the university and the location, would be extremely difficult, almost impossible, while Mileva allowed to do so in an easy and reliable manner. Moreover, Mileva provided also insights on the institution's likely evolution in the 3 or 4 coming years. So it provided a forecast together with customized suggestions for improvement. And this again is something that classic evaluations are not able to provide. So artificial intelligence offered us unbiased results, relevance, customization, and forecast. You see, another point that I would like to raise is that although the use of artificial intelligence in the higher education field is a current growing trend, as we have been able to hear yesterday and today, this is the first time that an organization applies artificial intelligence to evaluate universities' performance at an international scale, worldwide in fact, and in an independent manner. So we can say that we are pioneering. An initiative. Our initiative is pioneer. And last point, from a more personal perspective, I must admit that before working with Thierry, Lorho, and his team, artificial intelligence sounded to me as something quite futuristic, like relating to science fiction and quite obscure also, if you want. But then I learned that Mileva is based on the actor network theory, which is in fact a theory that comes from sociology. And as a sociologist, I know very well this theory. I'm using it myself. Of course, this theory has been applied to the analysis of a wide range of issues, well beyond sociology, as illustrates Mileva. So for me, this was a surprise, but a good surprise that showed that social sciences and information technology sciences are more intertwined than we can imagine, and also closer than most of us imagine, right? Of course, at the beginning of the project, I had to become familiar with some of the notions and procedures used by Mileva in order to collaborate with Thierry and his team. And some of the jargon used by Mileva had to be translated also in terms that could be understood by anybody coming from another background. Well, this translation phase required joint effort. And I still remember sitting with Thierry and his team on one occasion in order to add some sentences next to the graphs of the dashboard that Mileva has produced, so that the institutions were able to interpret their results by themselves, because the terms used are not easy to understand if there's no kind of translation. You know, you must be initiated to the way it works. Otherwise, you need some indication to be able then to read the graphs and then to understand the terms that are being used and make the right interpretation. So overall, the collaboration was smooth and easy. And as I said, the benefits have been numerous and unique. And what is sure is that without artificial intelligence, it would have not been possible to create such an innovative and comprehensive assessment system as the one we have created at IFCU. So this is what I wanted to share with you quite a quick way.
Thank you, Montserrat, for having shared this experience, this first experience with artificial intelligence. I think that it was a very, very interesting testimony. There is a question from João de Tavernier. I don't know if you can see it. I can read it. João just wrote, in my view, we have to carefully distinguish between several issues. First, what does it mean to be human in a setting where technological interventions may impact strongly on our humanity? Second aspect, dealing with human-centered artificial intelligence approaches. This seems to be more in line with traditional approaches about responsible use of any kind of technology. Socially assistive robots in elderly care, for instance. And third aspect, the question of human enhancement. My question to the panelists, what will be your advice in order to have the ethics debate about artificial intelligence more structured? I think that is a very interesting question, and that the two researches that you propose are very interesting. They are probably complementary, but on the other side, I think that perhaps they don't go in exactly the same side. So this question is very, very interesting, and I would be very interested in listening to your responses.
Okay, maybe I can.
Yes, you want to start?
First, a very general comment to, I don't know if it's rendering the debate more structured, but to render it manageable, I think we really have to work upon widespread teaching of literacy about AI, machine learning, and other types of AI, because it's not only machine learning. And maybe we should push people to abandon the term AI, but that's another topic. But it's crucial because, for instance, machine learning, even when it's unsupervised deep learning, there is always human choices and inputs at the beginning. You have to define machine learning in that sense. It's basically optimizing algorithmic structure to find the correct parameters to get the data transformation we want. And even when it's unsupervised, it's not coming from nowhere. It's basically one of the techniques is compression, decompression tools that are used to get the most significant information in a data set, and to then encode it and decode it. And that's sometimes what we call unsupervised learning. So when you tell things a bit better like that, you empower people to participate to the question and the regulations such technologies raise. And for instance, for explainability, we often say it's a black box. AI is a black box because it's a deep neural network, and it's true that you can't really follow the data transformation in the huge deep neural networks, but still we can explain because we have to, engineers and data scientists, they build the heuristic program, they build everything that will optimize the network and parameterize it. So it's not really that we don't know how it works. It's a different kind of explanation we have to give. But this, to understand that and to start a bit opening the black box, you have to say, for instance, here is our objective, and to do the learning, we give that type of examples, and we intend to reproduce the example, and it's working or not. And so it's not about black boxes, it's about reliable or unreliable extraction of information from data we use for learning. So that type of literacy, I don't know up to which point we have to teach the reality of technologies, but we have to talk about that. And it's also resonating with what Thierry said just before about the grasping correctly the powers of the technologies we have to be able to then discuss what we do want to do with them. And then just very shortly, more precisely, clearly the project I'm conducting is more focused on the background of ethical questioning compared to the one William presented. It will be really focused on what it means to be human. When you say I want a human-centered AI, then the NHNAI project will try to work a bit in the background of that type of questioning to interrogate what it means to be human. But the connections are obvious, and when I saw the presentation, I was very interested.
Okay, thank you very much, Mathieu. Yes.
Could I say one thing? Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Yes, it's a good question, a good provocation in a way, to be clear, especially, I'm trained as a philosopher, and to be clear about and precise about the ways in which you're using terms and distinctions between different potential ethical issues with AI. I mean, clearly there's a host of specific sort of concrete issues related to bias, algorithmic bias, in the sense of, AI systems reproducing human forms of misogyny or racism, for instance, but also a different, that came up yesterday, but also a different kind of bias that I want to highlight, which is that at the beginning of the AI project, if you read some of the statements issued at the conference at Dartmouth University in 1956, the famous, creation myth of AI and computer and cognitive science, is the idea that in principle, all forms of human thought and intelligence can be captured and more precisely performed by computers. And so there's an odd relationship here between the human being, the creator, and then the machine that is in some ways meant to be at least in some of the founding documents of this technology, of the academic reflection on this technology, the relationship being one of creating something that can do what we do, but better. Can think, can respond, can make judgments, but better than us. Less bias, less subject to the cognitive, weaknesses that we see in social psychology and irrationalities and various forms of irrationalities that psychologists are now showing us that we do all the time, right? Now, the trouble here is it seems like from the start, the human being is in a kind of diminished relationship to the ideal of the machine. Like from the start, the picture is the human being as this inferior computational mechanism, and that we could create a machine that would do better than us. And in many ways, the way that AIs are used in management and in courtrooms, the Compass algorithm in the United States reflects this hope that we could have a machine that could do, so to speak, do our practical thinking for us better than we can. We set the parameters, but then it does the work. I think that's deeply problematic, that attitude towards the human AI relationship is deeply problematic. Not least because we live in liberal democratic republics, at least many of us. And a core idea of liberal democracy is the possibility of debate, the public offering of reasons for different proposals, of justifications for different proposals that are intelligible to human beings and human agents, and that are not just the deliverances of a superior abstract form of intelligence, artificial intelligence, right? That can just think better than us and give us, give us the right answers, so to speak. So I think it's key to question the picture of the human that is implicit in a lot of AI literature. And it requires recognizing that the category or the concept human is not simply a biological descriptive concept. It is that, of course. It is the concept that comes up in evolutionary biology, Homo sapiens, and so forth. But it is more than that. It is an ethical concept that has normative dimensions related to human virtues, distinctively human abilities, human skills, human capacities. So maybe one way to get at the clarification that the questioner was asking is to recognize that at the basis of all these questions, whether it's enhancement or humane use of technology or whatever, sits a certain concept, the human. And that concept is not the proprietary ownership of just the biological sciences. They have an important thing to say there, but ethicists, philosophers, sociologists, historians, theologians also can contribute to our understanding of the human. Similar things I think need to be said about morality and ethics, which often gets a rather simplistic treatment in some of this debate about instilling values into machines. So we do need to clarify and bring clarity to the debate, but in a way, I think we also need to complexify, if I can say that, the debate, to show that, in fact, these concepts, ethics, morality, right and wrong, the human, they're actually quite profound ideas, and they require probing that is both scientific and humanistic and philosophical. So I'll just say that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Don't complexify too much, because I think that it is already very complex. There is a question from Corinne to add to Yves' question, beyond publication and academic debates, what relevant key actors, decision makers do you hope seek to reach so that your research has an actual impact on how the human artificial intelligence issue will evolve in the coming years? I think that it is a very important question, and related also to what you have mentioned. Both of you have mentioned about the current situations of our democracies, of course. William, would you like to answer the first?
Yeah, certainly. This is an important topic, and especially philosophers and, well, I guess all academics, we love to speak to the people within our sandbox, I believe, as Don Howard put it earlier in the last session. Speak to people that use the same terms that we do, that are familiar with the literature that we're familiar with, and so forth. And so I think AI is an issue that is sufficiently significant morally and complex in its inherently that it requires a multidisciplinary perspective. It requires analysis from people coming at it from a whole range of different disciplines, and it has to be translatable. It needs to be able to be translated into an idiom that the public, the broader educated public, can wrap their minds around and understand. I think it's not clear to me in my experience here in Portugal in the last few years, or in the US prior to this, that people understand some of the depth of the issue related to, for instance, surveillance and data collection and behavioral monitoring. I mean, I get a lot of, when I bring this up, people say, well, who cares if they mine my data, if they give me free YouTube and so forth? Who cares if these chat bots are AI generated, as long as I get the convenience of these goods and services that these new technologies provide? So I think we need to be able to enrich the broader public debate around these issues. And that requires not just publishing in specialized journals, academic journals that like 5 people read, but publishing in platforms, multimedia things, and as well as traditional sort of newspapers and journals that can reach the broader public. And I think also, as the question as the Corinne puts it, key actors and decision makers. I mean, I think it is important to invite political analysts. I mean, I'm in a politics program. Invite political analysts, practicing politicians, regulators, people from NGOs and international organizations to a seat to these debates, because these are not just academic intellectual debates. These are debates about the future shape of the societies that we will have in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So it's, I think, a very important point.
Thank you. Mathieu, I think that in your research, you have planned to mobilize different stakeholders in a very specific manner. Could you explain us how you will proceed?
Yes, sure. In the framework of the project, the social communities will be constituted through non-profit organizations. And so the idea is to gather several users associations in the different fields, education, health, and democracy, of AI technologies or I'm thinking also a patient association for neural diseases. So that type of association, they will they will recruit among their members persons who would like to participate to those intermediate debates William was talking about. Probably the good lucky for debate are not the totally widespread audience on social networks or things like this, because it's really, really tricky to find a path in between the kind of technocratic authoritarianism of experts and the post-modern fake news, post-truth, whatever stuff. And so for me, there is a huge work to conduct at the interface, but even to frame questions. Because what are the questions? And I'm also climbing up a bit in the chat because Eve were asking about the public authorities. What should they do? What could be their role? And I think there is a need to open a space and to get a workforce and to identify those questions that are okay. I can talk as a philosopher, I can talk as a physicist, I can talk as a computer scientist, and I can bring very interesting insights into the problems. But at a certain point, and each day I'm working in ethics, I arrived at those points. I feel that I cross a border where then I do not speak as an expert, but I speak as a human being. And what would be really interesting is to identify what are the questions that we can discuss among those communities at the interface between academics and broader audience, because it's not all the questions, but even this requires work and debates to be done. So from the public authorities, we might ask to get a kind of framework where we can even have the environment to gather and to start this work, not even answering, but saying, okay, what are the questions? Can I really debate about should I drink or not eau de javel or whatever to cure coronavirus? Probably not. So what are the questions that we can really explore collectively, and where also it's a kind of modesty and humility from academic experts when we have to say, we are not experts of that question. We can help to structure it and to frame it, but we can't answer it. Then we talk as a regular human, and we have to talk with our fellow human about that.
Thank you, Mathieu. We have another question coming from Hélène Tessier, who is professor at St. Paul University in Canada. Hélène writes, thank you for this conference. I would like to come back to Thierry Magnin's presentation about the close relations between epistemology and ethics, and to extend it to both presentation of Mathieu and William on humanism. So she has two questions. First, do you include humanism in epistemological issues related to reflecting on artificial intelligence? Do you consider humanism as part of an epistemological tradition which can feed critical reflection on IA, more specifically on the issue of meaning? And she would like to add another question, which is more political. Humanism and humanist tradition are disappeared in social sciences curricula, at least in Canada, she said. This is why I think the research projects described this morning are very important. Morning because she's in Canada. Do you have ideas on the rehabilitation of humanism in the present context? So in fact, three very important and essential questions. I think that those questions are also for the former panelists, of course.
Yeah, well, maybe, but it's so huge, and thank you for those questions. It's just crazy. There is so much to say, but maybe an element about humanism and epistemology. It's really intertwined topics, and we saw that the scientific method is definitely associated with modernity, if not humanism. And I even discovered some writings about the connections between the discovery of physical nature and mathematization of the description of nature with Galileo and then Descartes as seeds for Descartes dualism, because we have an epistemological stance saying, okay, the good rationality goes through scientific method, and then we exclude from the picture many elements that we can't discuss in that logic, and then we arrived at the look, in nature there is only physical bodies, and so it's the res extensa, and then all that is human is in the res cogitans. And then the other path is also existing. That means that when you have a certain conception of the human, then you will foster a certain epistemology. And for now, it's really a vicious circle, for sure, and probably vicious, because when we got that tradition, so maybe dualism, it's not that much into our minds now, but the epistemological background is definitely in it, and we lost probably not the ability to think about ethical questions, but the epistemological strength and then the political strength we will grant to discourses pertaining to ethics and moral philosophy or things like this, at least by comparison with talk coming from sciences and look, reality is like this, we can do that and this with that knowledge, and then we are a bit trapped into kind of enthusiasm about that, and we lost a bit the sight that even behind science there are normative questions and there are need for normative judgments, and behind AI too, and then it's hidden, but it's here. We're always doing evaluative procedures, and we're always thinking beyond just the restricted realm of science, and so we really have to question that connection between what we are, how do we think that we should think, and so on and so forth, to also give strength to ethics and ethical endeavor. And it's also a question about how you call that, the sharing the intellectual tasks, and who is entitled to talk about what issues, so to make the connection with what I was saying. But I think this is more for the first question, and maybe I'll let the other panelists react too.
Thank you, Mathieu. William, we got some comments.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful quote from one of my favorite 20th century philosophers, Ludwig Wittgenstein, in his later period, in which he said that sort of for the modern 20th century thinker, art and literature exist to entertain us, but the idea that they could teach us anything is seen as sort of, is not even considered, because of the kind of prestige and preeminence given to natural scientific theory and the kind of procedures and findings characteristic of the natural scientific method. And what I think humanism can contribute to, as the question focused on sort of rehabilitating or transforming, modernizing the notion of humanism. I mean, one thing that humanism can add is a recognition that, I mean, a two-pronged thing. One, a recognition of the value and crucial importance of scientific inquiry and discovery, but also a recognition that there are modes of knowledge and insight available to the human being other than explicit propositional mathematical theorizing. I think that can be demonstrated very clearly. I mean, you know what the color green looks like. You know what it's like to walk through a particular town at a particular time and place. Knowledge that is given to us through our embodied, conscious experience as individual agents in a human life world. How do you, I mean, these modes, and of course there are other forms of sort of tacit or intuitive forms of knowledge, practical abilities, skills. I know how to tie my shoes, right? I have no idea how I would give an explicit propositional representation of how I tie my shoes, but I know how to tie my shoes. And other things, even more complicated than that, right? And all of us have these sort of what Aquinas would have called habitus, right? And Aristotle spoke of as practical intelligence, modes of human knowing that also have value and are also important for human life, but that are distinct from the kind of, or the mode of knowledge characteristic of the hard natural sciences, the kind of view from nowhere, dehumanized picture of the material world as a mere mechanism, and of the human being as a mechanical, biological, physical entity, right? That is a valuable, significant, crucial perspective on reality, but it shouldn't be the only perspective, especially when we're thinking about ethical questions. If we're thinking about how to, what kind of future we want to have, we need to maintain contact with and respect for other modes of human knowing and insight and intelligence that seem different from computation or calculation, and that are no worse, that are no lesser because they don't involve explicit computation and resist being modeled in computational terms. So I think humanism has a crucial role to play in that respect. And part of humanizing the AI relationship would involve identifying skills and know-how that we have as humans that we think are valuable and that we think should be preserved. We know that people who become very dependent on automation technologies and AI decision support, they start to lose their skills. I mean, we've found this out. I mean, a key example of this is aviation, right? Pilots who barely fly planes anymore because the systems are all automated. And when there's an emergency, there have been tragic cases where pilots simply, they don't know how to fly a plane. They don't know. I mean, they're basically just a computer overseer in the cockpit. And now maybe flying a plane isn't the most important thing in the world, but what about talking with your children or maintaining a community or having these sort of ethically salient forms of human action? There, I think it is important to say, these are human capacities that we want AI not to supplant. We want AI to, we want to maintain and strengthen those abilities, not have them replaced by some kind of very precise computer system. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for this, for your two responses and for this so important dialogue with us. I think that it will be the beginning of a very long and prospective reflection among us. So thank you to the panelists for what you have said today. Unfortunately, it's 5 p.m. and I think that we have to conclude. And for that, I will give the floor to Yves Poulet. Yves is the honorary rector of the University of Namur in Belgium. He is also associate professor at the University, the Catholic University of Lille, and the vice chairman of UNESCO's IFAP program. So I give you the floor, and it will be a very difficult task to conclude such a forum. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Francois, and thanks a lot for alerting me about the difficulty of the task. These two sessions appear as a firework. Each of us feels him or herself under the éblouissement of so many stimulating and clever reflection. At this time of conclusion, you come to me and raise the question and know, what are we doing? I would like to answer by responding to 3 questions, which, in my opinion, are like the red thread of your intervention and your interrogation. I quote them. First, why do we need infoethics? Second, which ethical values are we discussing about? And the third, how our Catholic University has to answer to these infoethics challenges. What could be the recommendations for the future of our mission as Catholic University? So I come to the first question. Why do we need infoethics? At our digital age, with AI, big data, and other emerging technologies, the question becomes every day more important. Ethical, raised by the socio-ethical issues, raised by the societal impact of the development of artificial intelligence, are drawing the attention of international, public, and private organizations. I quote, OECD, UNESCO, Council of Europe, you have mentioned that yesterday, but also, and more recently, EU, institutions like Commission and EU Parliament. Ethical values are considered as the core of the third way presented by EU institutions for the development of AI. I would like also to mention African Union and Arab League initiatives. As regards the private sector, there are a lot of things to mention, especially the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems, the Montreal Declaration, but also the harmonious artificial intelligence principle developed by international sectoral organizations. Why that common and internationally recognized concern about ethics? We are embedded within a digital society. I mean that digital is everywhere, ubiquitous. Definitely not only in our office, but from now on in our more and more autonomous cars, in our walls, notably through connected loudspeakers, in our clothes, in our pockets, in our bodies with implants. We are surrounded both by networks infrastructure with an infinite capacity still increasing as regards the capacity of storage, of processing, and of transmission, and in the same time by nano terminals connected to the infrastructure, collecting data at each moment of our life, including our blood pressure, our visitation in front of a product in the supermarket. By the way, it is forecast that in 2025, each European people per day will be in contact with 4,800 connected devices or terminals. Even as Thierry has recalled, if digital brings many benefits to our society, to our lives, and frees us from many constraints, in the same time, certain risks must be underlined and avoided. First, all the system, the terminals, the data flows, the algorithms processing the data are working in an opaque manner, including for their producer and deployers, and rarely know where my data are flowing, for whom, and for which usage. Second point, robots are invading our daily life and definitely seem endowed with human capacity like speech, thoughts, and aptitude for decisions and action. And that, according to rules, I do ignore. Third point, the artificial intelligence systems are functioning sometimes with error or bias through complex statistical aggregation, continuous evolving. They are working on huge big data and connecting different neural networks. They are able to predict the future, not only for each of us, but also for our society. At the same time, fourth point, this artificial intelligence system have the capacity to manipulate our minds, the famous nudge or the fake news, and even our beings as Professor Magna has underlined. Or beings by genetic manipulation, which is presently a reality thanks to the NBIC technology. They are generating the myth of an augmented mind. All these risks are all the more important as the informational power is concentrated in the hands of increasingly powerful companies, the famous US GAFAM or the China sisters, the BATX, which impose on our states their global regulation. So the ethical question is pregnant and central. It might be summarized as such. If digital might be considered as the building block of our society from social, economic, political point of view, of our life, of our identities, how can we individually as human, but also collectively as democratic society keep control of such a fast, complex, protean, ubiquitous innovation with unpredictable innovation? Human in the loop, human under the loop, human on the loop, asserted recently the EU high-level group of experts on AI. I am convinced with these experts that it is fundamental that we as humans, individually, but also collectively, we keep the mastership of the development of our digital society. That assertion is particularly to be underlined at the AI age, where we have so much confidence in the machine that we entrust it the competence to decide insidiously on more and more numerous and crucial aspects of our life. That assertion is particularly to be underlined at a moment where human being, and I quote what certain authors said, certain people have said this afternoon, at a moment where human beings feel in an inferior position compared to the AI capabilities, forgetting that this AI is nothing else than an artifact of our human intelligence. So I come to the second point, which ethical values. UNESCO Convention on Bioethics might be a good source of inspiration, and that for different reasons. First, the aim of this convention is to be recalled, since it is the same aim that we must pursue today with the idea of a global convention on bioethics. On that point, I quote the preamble of the Bioethics Convention. Convinced that it is necessary and that it is time for international community to set out a universal principle on which humanity can respond to the growing dilemmas and controversy that science and technology pose to humanity and the environment. Secondly, I am firmly convinced that the current progress of NBIC science, in particular the progress in terms of genetic manipulation, oblige a reconciliation of bioethics and infoethics as the FIUC project presented by Mathieu has demonstrated the interest. Thirdly, the Bioethics Convention is based on 4 fundamental ethical values which are universally recognized, I mean common to all the nations around the world. These ethical values are deeply affected by the development of our digital society. I quote these ethical values: dignity, autonomy, social justice, and finally, the principle do good and no harm. Just a few explanations about all these 4 ethical values. The dignity. According to Immanuel Kant, the famous German philosopher, respect of human dignity implies and it is the aim of our action, that you never have to consider an individual as a tool, but always as the aim of your action. That value has to be recorded at a time where more and more people are reduced to data and considered as such, because data do not lie. Human beings might lie. Second, that values of dignity has to be recorded at a moment where through their data and their profiles, people's opinions and decisions might be manipulated as indicated above. Other question about dignity, whereas the human dignity if others might define your identity by manipulating your genome, whereas your dignity when spying at all the moments of your life, you become transparent to certain companies or given administration. Second ethical value, the autonomy. Autonomy is another word for self-determination, to the power to be ourselves, as Thierry recalled it. This value is translated by the legal term of privacy, which is more than data protection and cover what the Nobel Prize Amartya Sen has developed with the concept of capability. The concept refers to the obligation for our states to put at the disposal of each individual the reasonable means for developing his or her own personality in a peculiar society. And in the same time, it is the duty for states and private sector not to interfere and hinder the development of each of us. Applying to this concept to our digital society, it means to give education to people in order to understand the main features of our digital society. It means the possibility to disconnect the terminals surrounding me. It means, above all, the transparency of the digital flows and the data processing. It means, finally, the right to have a human explanation about the decision taken by the machine and the possibility of human recourse in case of automated decision. Finally, autonomy presupposes that you have, even if limited, a possibility of choice. Are you free if for accessing to a web page or a service, you are forced to accept cookies and all the end purposes imposed by the operator? Thirdly, the social justice. Social justice implies that all the actors involved in the development or deployment of AI system pay attention to avoid bias and error which lead to discrimination between groups of people. It might be the age or the sex of the candidate to an employment, it might be the distrust vis-à-vis certain communities suspected of future criminal offenses. It might be the fact that certain people, according to their common profiles, will have to pay more than others do, and that for the same service, or will be excluded as regard houses or apartments rentals. Any software, algorithm, or data produced by artificial intelligence should be unbiased and shall not discriminate on grounds such as race, gender, sexual orientation, pregnancy, disability, physical genetic feature, and so and so. In the same time, AI has to pay attention to maintain the diversity, not only cultural, according to different nations, but also as regards the opinion. We know that AI might be a tool for normalization of opinion and behavior. AI might not be a way for any cultural and social stereotyping, including notably local customs and religious tradition. Finally, AI actors have to ensure that training data sets for AI systems should not foster cultural and social inequalities. The last principle is expressed as follows: do good and do not harm. The design of the technology must be value sensitive. We have to embed in the design of AI system the ethical values. All the actors involved in the conception, deployment, and use of system have to assume their social responsibility, as said by the last speaker. According to the precautionary principle, they have to ensure that the technology comply with ethical values, bring optimal social, environmental, and economic outcomes, and that their innovation not result in injury or harm of any kind to be caused to individuals or society. The design of the technology has to be done under human scrutiny and audited, not only from a technical point of view, but also as regards the social and human impacts of their implementation. So let's come to the third question. Which lesson and new mission for our Catholic University? In order to face all the challenges described before, we have to underline the crucial role our university have to play according to their mission as Catholic places of research, teaching, and support to the society. Putting people and his or her dignity and his or her solidarity at the heart of our reflection or teaching is our trademark. It does not imply a systematic doubt with regard to the development of digital technology and application, but more the critical search for the meaning of their development and to put them at the service of the humanity. The human being is characterized not by the rejection of innovation, but on the contrary, by its progressive and collective mastery. Technology cannot be a tool of domination of the other, but must lead to a common search, never completed, but always open to master the development of this technology. We know that digital technology creates an unprecedented disequilibrium of information power between information have and information have nots. That digital constitute, therefore, a formidable instrument of domination for certain private interests, not only vis-à-vis individuals, but also vis-à-vis states. That digital makes possible profound transformation of humans and their constitution, even the dream of their replacement by machine intelligence. Facing this different challenge, our duty is not to launch anathemas in face of scientific progress, but in the light of our Christian reflection on what is unique to the human being, I mean, the absolute value of each individual, the inseparability of body and mind, and the social nature of human people. We have to alert on the demands of this human nature, and our university must play this role of ethical counterpower and call for informed public debates. Concretely, what does it mean? First, if digital has invaded our life, it must also invade our teachings, as Professor Ward said. It is not so much a question of teaching in all our faculty the concept of the computer science. It is not so much a question of teaching in all our faculty the concept of the computer science, but more of bringing the tools of digital in our teaching in a critical way and ethical manner, and taking care of maintaining the human relationship. Beyond that, it is above all a matter of helping the students, whether he's a lawyer, psychologist, doctor, biologist, to reflect on the way in which the use of digital technology in society and by professionals modify, sometimes perverts, but in all cases require to deepen the basic concept of our science and impact of society. To achieve that, we will need a multidisciplinary approach. We have to organize seminars where students from various faculties will be able to meet and analyze concrete digital applications together. For instance, it is impossible to talk about intelligent cars without meeting the eyes of the psychologist. What becomes of my relationship to the car when it is no longer synonymous with freedom and the possibility of transgressing the norm? It is impossible to talk about intelligent car without crossing the opinions of the economics, who will draw attention notably to the arrival of new entrants and will interrogate the lawyers about the fact that privacy, competition, and liability law rules might impact the development of innovation. Without discussing with ethical people, we will show that ethical problem of the smart car is not reduced to knowing whether it is better to run over 5 dogs, a brilliant student, or all cripples. And finally, to receive the lives of the computer scientists who will analyze security issues related to the future use of 5G. Other examples could be evoked: blockchain robots, hospital drones, transhumanist experience. It looks for me important to discuss ethics, not dogmatically, but facing concrete situations. As regards the research, our research should initiate the interdisciplinary approach. Recently, I experimented the interest to work with a computer scientist on profiling and privacy. We must work together, human scientists and human science scientists, in order to deliver a just world and not to give into shortcuts and rumors. Catholic University owe it to themselves to advocate the interdisciplinarity of research, not as a dogma, but as a vivid reality to be gradually created through research projects, notwithstanding the race for ranking, which unfortunately partition of discipline. I would also underline the importance to work into international networks, confronting different approach. Finally, I would like to say that digital makes our world only apparently unique. We have to pay attention between Catholic researchers to build it progressively as our common whole. Thirdly, we have to be an open space for discussion with all stakeholders, including simple citizens. We have to invite them to take part to our discussion. It is a fundamental element of our social responsibility, which is no more limited to environmental or social questions, but must encompass our role as watchdog as regards the transformation of our digital lives and society. Our research must be led in dialogue with civil society representatives, and we must be proactive in creating bridges and interface with them. We must ensure that our reflection or debates are inserted into the art of society, certainly through conferences, but also through our presence in social networks and on discussion platforms at a time when disinformation is raging there. Finally, our mission as Catholic University is to prepare our young students to master the radical transformation of the environment, where they will have to act and to take fully their responsibilities as human beings, taking care of our common whole. Therefore, as Professor Howard has underlined, it is our duty to analyze and to manage the transition Eventually, we have to forecast this deep modification in order to see the best way our students will be able to integrate all this modification and master them. Therefore, I do suggest that IFCU launches an interdisciplinary group to map all this modification, to exchange existing best practice, and progressively to define new teaching methods, new education programs, and new topics of research and teaching. This group will have to pay attention to the skills and experience needed, as well as the reflex behaviors to be encouraged for our future students. This group will define the objective for which educational methods and programs are then to be developed. Doing that, we have not to be afraid to be innovative. At the contrary, it is our role, our social responsibility, and we might hope that our final proposal will inspire our governments. Otherwise, there is a risk, a real risk, that tomorrow our university will be replaced by international educational programs at distance developed by high-tech companies with, I can imagine, the support of certain prestigious universities, and that without the needed critical distance and ethical reflection. And now I conclude. Infoethics at our digital age is too important for not being taken seriously and together by our Catholic University. Please, no ethics bashing. It is a question of survival for our humanity and our responsibility as Catholic University. Thanks to the whole IFCU team, François and the others, and to you, Corinne, for this opportunity to discuss together about this crucial problem. Thanks a lot.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I always seem to have trouble unmuting.
Sorry, I hear you. No problem.
Activating. I also wanted to really thank everybody. As you can perhaps imagine, the organization, preparation of all this, given what the world has gone through and has been going through since we started organizing this thing, has not been self-evident, and especially the transfer to an online format that required redesigning the whole thing and downsizing it. And so given all that, I just want to thank all participants, all speakers, all panelists, and really salute the quality, the range, the scope of issues that were discussed, were debated. I think perhaps we can say that some seeds have been planted for further dialogue, further cooperation on these issues. That is at least what I hope this will achieve. And so once again, thank you very, very, very much. I worked hard on it, but I don't feel frustrated by the results. And that by and of itself is an achievement, if I can credit myself with that, which is unmodest. And you'll forgive me for that. Thank you again very, very, very much to all of you.
Thanks, Corinne.
Well done, Corinne.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Isabel, you want to close with the last word?
Everything has been said already along these 2 days. I think it's just important to thank the panelists and say that IFCU will reconvene in presence the forum next year. So I hope to see you all there next time, hopefully in Rome, hopefully in presence. And until then, yeah. stay safe.
And without masks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, Corinne.